Imagine waking up on a cold stone floor before the sun touches the streets of Rome. Your body aches from yesterday's labor, but no one asks if you slept. There's no good morning, no warm water, no choice. You are already late. This was the unseen reality for thousands, maybe millions of people who served Rome not by choice, but by force. Yet they weren't all in chains, not always. Some taught noble children, some cooked for senators, some built the roads that still survive today. Some were born into this world of silence, others taken by war, debt, or betrayal. But all of them were owned. When we imagine the Roman Empire, we picture marble columns, golden armor, feasts of roasted boar and sweet wine. But behind that splendor stood the backs of the broken. Rome didn't just conquer land, it conquered people. And those people became tools. Some of them were treated well, fed, clothed, even educated. But make no mistake, kindness from a master was never freedom. It was control wrapped in velvet. A tutor in a senator's villa could be beaten for a child's mistake. A cook might serve flamingo tongue on silver plates, then sleep on the kitchen floor beside the firewood. And the worst part? It was all legal, accepted, expected. The Roman world didn't question it. It ran on it. The lucky ones had roles inside the home: caretakers, scribes, companions. The unlucky were sent to quarries, mines, or galleys, where few lived long enough to grow old. Some tried to escape. Fewer succeeded. If caught, the punishment wasn't death. It was worse: branding, torture, mutilation. And the message was clear: you don't run, you don't belong to yourself. Yet within all this darkness, there were sparks of rebellion, of love, of hope. There are stories, hidden between scrolls and stones, of people who endured, who resisted, who remembered their names even when the empire didn't. This is their story. Imagine a marketplace not filled with goods, but with people, men, women, children, standing on display, examined like livestock. Muscles prodded, teeth checked, scars inspected. Buyers asked questions, not about character, but condition. Can she cook? Does he speak Greek? How many years is he? This wasn't rare. It was routine. In cities like Rome, Capua, or Ephesus, markets for human lives were a normal part of daily life. People stood naked beneath signs that listed their skills. And if you couldn't read, that was written too. Not literate. Some came from distant lands, Gaul, Syria, Africa, taken as spoils of war. Others were sold by desperate families. Some were even born in chains, their fates sealed before their first breath. The youngest were the most valuable, trainable, obedient, unscarred. The elderly, often discarded or forced into the cruelest work. Once sold, a person became property under Roman law. Not a person with rights, an object. If broken, you replaced it. If rebellious, you punished it. No trial, no appeal, no protection. Even the kindest master could change their mind on a whim, and no one would stop them. And yet, Roman society relied on these people completely. The great marble villas, the elaborate baths, the well-fed nobility, they were only possible because someone else suffered quietly behind the curtain. Even language betrayed them. The Latin word servus comes from servare, to keep, to preserve. A servant wasn't someone who helped. It was someone kept, possessed, but they weren't silent forever. Archaeologists have uncovered scratched names in villa walls, messages left in kitchens and courtyards. Short, defiant marks. I was here. I worked. I lived. Because even if Rome erased their names from the records, these people tried to leave proof behind. To say, I existed. This was not a side story. It was the foundation of empire. Once sold, your life was no longer your own. You might be brought to a wealthy household, an imperial estate, or a grim industrial farm. You learned quickly. Silence meant safety. Eyes down, hands busy. In a noble Roman villa, appearances were everything. The floors were polished marble, the walls painted with gods and heroes. But behind every curtain, there were people sweeping, cooking, dressing, lighting fires, always present, never seen. Household roles varied, and so did suffering. Some were cooks, preparing lavish meals they would never taste. Others tended gardens they were forbidden to rest in. The most trusted cleaned their master's body, carried their secrets, even raised their children they would never call their own. They lived in cramped quarters, storage rooms, basements, kitchens, often with straw mats for beds and clay pots for warmth. Illness spread fast. Rest was brief. Food was minimal. Their names were rarely spoken, just commands barked in passing. Some were educated, especially the foreign-born. Greek tutors, Egyptian scribes. They taught philosophy, math, languages to the children of those who owned them. But that education was a tool of control. A literate servant was more useful, but still replaceable. Outside the cities, life could be worse. On vast estates called latifundia, field workers toiled from sunrise to sunset, exposed to heat, insects, whips. They harvested crops for owners they'd never meet. And in the mines, there were no seasons, only rock, dust, and darkness. Few survived more than a few years underground. And if someone disobeyed, punishment was immediate. Beatings, shackling, branding, or worse, public examples made to frighten the rest. But amid this cruelty, bonds formed. Among those who served, there was understanding, shared pain, quiet compassion, sometimes even love. They helped one another survive, because no one else would. They weren't just workers, they were watchers, listeners, survivors. And while history forgot their names, they were the eyes and ears of the empire. Not everyone accepted their fate. Whispers of escape passed in dark corners, exchanged in glances rather than words. Some fled under the cover of night, dressed in rags, barefoot, without food. They followed roads built by their own hands, hoping to vanish into the forests or disappear among the poor in distant cities. But Rome was everywhere. There were patrols, informants, bounty hunters, paid to return runaways. And if caught, punishment was not simply severe. It was a message. A man who fled might be branded with the letter F for fugitivus. A woman could be paraded through the streets. Some were executed, others mutilated. And in the cruelest cases, punishment fell not only on the runaway, but on everyone who worked beside them. Some chose another path, rebellion. The most famous uprising was led by a man named Spartacus, a former gladiator who united thousands in open defiance. His forces defeated Roman legions again and again. For a moment, the unthinkable seemed possible, but Rome responded with fury. The revolt was crushed. 6,000 of his followers were crucified along the Appian Way, their bodies left hanging for months, an endless, silent warning. The message, resistance, meant erasure. Yet not all defiance was open. Many resisted quietly, breaking tools, hiding grain, teaching forbidden songs, preserving stories. They found ways to hold on to identity in a world that denied it. Faith, rituals, language, these became shields. In whispered prayers or scratched symbols beneath staircases, they preserved pieces of their lost homes. And some waited. A few earned freedom, not by rebellion, but by patience. In rare cases, a person could be granted release by their master. This was called manumission. Freed individuals became liberty, no longer property, but not truly equal either. They often remained tied to their former masters, forced to work for them in exchange for protection. But even liberty had limits. A libertus could not hold public office, could not marry into noble families. Their children might climb higher, but the scars of bondage never vanished. And for the vast majority, freedom was only a myth, something spoken of, but never seen, because Rome was not built for them to escape. We speak of Rome as the greatest civilization of the ancient world. Its architecture, its law, its legions. We admire its roads, still standing after 2,000 years. Its language, still echoing in modern tongues. But beneath all this marble were hands, calloused, cracked, trembling hands. Every column raised, every mosaic laid, every bath filled with perfumed water was made possible by people whose names were never recorded. They were the heartbeat of the empire, though Rome refused to give them a face. They cleaned the blood from amphitheater floors. They washed the robes of senators who debated philosophy. They prepared the bodies of the dead for funeral rites they could never afford for themselves. They listened. They watched. They remembered. Even after centuries of erasure, fragments remain. Bones buried in forgotten mass graves. Tools worn smooth from endless repetition. Messages carved in servant quarters. Felix was here. I miss home. These were not scribbles. They were survival. Proof that behind the marble mask, Rome was built on suffering. And yet, they endured. In silence, they passed down songs. In quiet glances, they gave comfort. In stolen moments, they reminded one another of who they had once been, before the chains, before the markets, before their names were taken. Some became legends, some escaped and vanished into myth, and some are buried beneath villas, never found. But they were real. The empire wants us to forget them. History books often skip their stories. We remember the emperors, the conquests, the glory. But without those who served in shadows, none of it would have been possible. So when you walk the ruins of Rome, when you look at the stones and columns and wonder, how did they build this? Remember the ones who held the hammers, the ones who bled between the cracks. They did not write the history, but they lived it.